Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 1134. Hey, if you want to download this workbook and follow along, click on the link below the video. Hey, we have an amazing video here, an epic video with 8 examples. We're going to talk about assigning categories with Excel formulas, and we're going to look at whether we want to use if or VLOOKUP. Now, over on the topic sheet, this lists all 8 examples. And below this video, if you click the Show More button, it'll have this list here with time hyperlinks, so you can jump to whichever topic you want. Now, if you're new to this, you should start at the beginning and go to the end, because then you'll see all the topics. All right, let's come over here. The basic idea here is that we need to assign a category. In this first example, we're going to look at the if function and hard-coded values. Now, here's the times for these racers and the racer's name. And we need to categorize them, whether they are pro category, fast, or intermediate. Now, the way this little table will work is you are a pro category if your time is between 0 all the way up to 35, but not including 35. You're fast if you're 35 seconds or above all the way up to 45, but not including 45. If you're 45 or above, you're intermediate. Now, oftentimes, when you have just a few categories, people like to use the if function. So we'll start off with this, the if function. Now, the great thing about the if function is there's a logical test. That's just some test that comes out true or false. And then the if function will ask you, hey, what do you want me to put in the cell if it's true? Otherwise, what do you want me to put in the cell if it's false? Now, this otherwise here, when we have more than 2 items, is where our second if will go. All right, so we're going to start off logical test. Now, this is a type of lookup or if construction where we have numbers and they need to fit into categories. So if you're going to use the if function, you either want to start at the smallest number and then go to the next smallest, or next biggest, or start at the upper end and go backwards. You don't want to start in the middle, because then you have to make your logical tests more complicated, like by using the and function. So I'm going to choose to start at the lower end and define the pro category first. Now, how do we get pro? If you're less than 35. So watch this. I'm going to say, hey, relative cell reference, 1, 2 to my left. Are you less than 35? Now, I'm hard coding in this example. Sometimes people like to hard code because the values are not going to change, or it's easier, or, which is not really true, or you don't want to have your table in the sheet. So this way, it's like a self-contained formula. Well, if it's less than 35, comma, then what do we want? We want the word pro. If you have text in formula, you got to put it in double quotes. All right? So there you go. If it's less than 35, the if function will plop a pro in the cell. Now, that's the value if true. So watch this, comma, value if false. If you just have 2 values, then you put the value if false there. But we don't. The way you decide whether you need another if is, hey, how many things do we have left? We still have 2, so you have to put another if. Now, the logical test is going to be, hey, is this, now wait a second. Look at this first. This is the logical test for the second if. Over here, that's a logical test that comes out true or false. If this comes out false, then that whole category is eliminated. That's why when we get to the second if, we can say, are you less than? It's going to be 45. So the only way we get to this 45 is if we've already eliminated the 35. All right, so if it's less than 45, which in our case, because it's been eliminated here, which means between, but not including 45 and 35. So what do we want? Comma, in double quotes, fast. All text goes into double quotes. Now we type a comma, and we get to the value of false. You ask yourself this question. How many values do we have left? There's only one possibility, so you don't need another if. You just type intermediate. All text is in double quotes. Now, watch the end of this formula. Close parentheses. It's orange. If it's a color, you know you have to keep typing parentheses until you see the black one. Once you see the black one, you know you're done. All right, you ready? Control Enter to put the formula in the cell and keep the cell selected. And I'm going to point to my little fill handle. And when I see my crosshair or angry rabbit, double click and send it down. And just like that, we get all of our categories. I'm going to come down to the last one and hit F2 just to notice the handiwork. The cell references are working. Our categories are calculating correctly. Now, the main problem with this is, well, I had to type a bunch of stuff out. But really, the problem is I've hard-coded these in, and this violates Excel's golden rule. What if later I wanted to define the category fast as 37 seconds? When I change this input, watch, nothing changes here. Control Z. So Excel's golden rule. There it is. If a formula input can change, put it into a cell and refer to it in the formula with a cell reference. If it will not change, you could type it into the formula. Always label your formula inputs. Notice we did label them over here. Now, I want to talk about why we started at 0 here. Really, with a lookup table, we want the first category to include all the possible values. So nothing we can enter in this column is going to be less than that because we'll get an error. But let's see what happens if someone doesn't have a score. I'm going to delete it. They're a pro. And the reason why is formulas that use cell references that refer to what's actually an empty cell. When I hit F9 key to evaluate this, F9, Excel will treat in a formula a completely empty cell as 0. Escape. Now, we could put some number here, right? 1 second or something like that. But you know, it's a slippery slope. I never am quite sure what the fastest time is going to be. Now, around this track, obviously, less than 10 seconds isn't going to work. I'm still going to keep that 0 there and leave it as 0. But we're going to amend our formula. So I'm going to come here. Notice we have 2 ifs. And the rule is if you have 1, 2, 3 things that we're trying to dump into the cell, 3 things, 1 less than that is 2. That's how many ifs we have. But now we want another thing in the cell, and that is no score. And I'm going to check for it before all of the other ifs. So watch this. We're going to add a third if. And I'm going to amend the front part of the formula. So right after the equal sign, I type if, tab to accept that. And the logical test, I'm going to use the ISBLANK function. And it's actually checking for an empty cell. So I'm going to close parentheses there. So now we have a logical test. Comma. That whole thing is in the value of true, but that's not really what I want. If ISBLANK comes out, which means empty cell, comes out true, I want in double quotes no score. End double quotes. Now watch this. Comma, value of false, the rest of that formula. Now I come to the end. I can clearly see I don't have a black one. That's the signal I need. One more parentheses. When I see the black one, Control Enter, double click and send it down. If I come over here and delete this one, no score. All right, now let's scroll down and look at our next example. Here, we're going to use the same if method, but we are not going to hard code our values. We're going to use our values over here and then change them and see if our formulas update. Actually, that is the beauty of Excel, right? That's the original idea of Bricklin and Frankston. Put your formula inputs in cells. When they change, you change them, and the formulas will update. So you ready? Equals if is blank. Notice every time I see the function I want in blue for my dropdown, I hit Tab, and it accepts it. Click on the cell, close parentheses. Comma, the value if true, no score. Now, why did we hard code that one in? Because that value is not going to change, whereas these ones might possibly change. Remember, that's a rule. If it ever can change, do not hard code it. But since this one won't change, we're hard coding it. All right, the next argument value of false, we still have more than a few items that can go into the cell, so we know we have to use another if. The logical test is going to be, hey, is this less than? And now we click on our value from our table. When we copy this formula down, those blue ones are relative cell references. So as we copy down, we always want to look 2 cells to the left. But that needs to be locked. As I copy it down, it's always looking at E24. The way you lock it is by hitting the F4 key. It puts the dollar signs for the column and row. That means no matter where we copy this, it'll always be locked on E24. Comma. The item is going to be pro. F4 to lock it. Comma. We still have 2 items left, so we need another if. This value right here is less than our 45. F4 to lock that one. Remember, this is relative. It'll move throughout the copy action. This one is not. It's locked throughout the copy action. All right, so if that value is less than 45, comma. Now notice it's hard to get to this. You can actually move your screen tip when you see that 4-way white cursor. You can drag it off to the side. We're still on value. If true, that's going to be fast. F4 to lock that. Otherwise, the value of false, there's only 1 item left. Click on the F25, F4 to lock it. Now, close parentheses. You keep typing those parentheses until you see the black one. Control, Enter, double click, and send it down. And so any one of these, if I leave it empty, boom, there's our no score. Control Z. Now, actually, I'm going to copy these values up here, and I want to show you a cool way to test. If this method and this method up here are the same, I'm going to copy Control C, the dancing ant, say I've copied it. Click in the top cell, Control V. Now, these should all be exactly the same. And I want to check that by clicking on the horizontal scroll and off to the side, let's say in H23, I want to create a logical formula. Equal sign starts every formula. Then I'm going to say relative cell reference that many over. And I'm going to use the equal sign a second time. That's actually a comparative operator. That's saying, hey, Excel, I want to do a formula. That's saying, hey, is whatever in C23 equal to, and this would be a relative cell reference also, that many up and over. But we're going to check to see if those 2 results are the same. Control Enter and copy it down. Now they should all be the same. Ooh, there's a problem. Hit F2. It's checking that. Whoa, look at that. Intermediate is spelled correct here, right? Even if we had misspelled it, our formula, if we changed it here, would update. But I want to go look at this over here. We hard-coded all of our values in. F2, look at that right there. I'm going to IA, Control Enter, double click, and send it down. So it's got the right spelling there. But now let's go down here and just see if both of these methods, they're all true, that logical formula. So that formula is looking good. I prefer a method like this for if because I can change any of the values. Let's try it. We just changed the categories. It's going to be 37 and 48. And now instantly, Iceman has been categorized as fast. Magic is still intermediate. I'm going to Control Z, Z to undo those. That's the beauty of using cell references and not hard coding your formulas in. Now, there's trouble with this just because it's such a long formula. And we'll have an example later on a large table where we have many categories. We never want to type out that many ifs. So let's go down and look at our next example, VLOOKUP. Now, we have our same table here with our lap time and categories. Here's a table, right? First column is what we will use when we look up the time to go look up here. Once we find a category, we'll come over to the second column, get the word, and bring it back to the cell. Before we could see how to use the much easier VLOOKUP, we have to make sure that the first column of our table is sorted smallest to biggest. All right, now, for any one of these cells, let's just pick Zane, 39.31. Now, how would we as a human go and get the proper category and bring it back to the cell? Well, here's what we do. And it's important that we look at how we humans do it by hand, because when we do, it'll make VLOOKUP easier. What do we do? What do we do as humans? We first look up the 3931. We remember it. We go over to the first column. We go racing down until we find the first value that's bigger. 45 is the first value bigger than 3931. So we jump back a row, and we know this is our row. We go over to the second category, we get the word fast. We come over here and we put fast. If you know how to do that regularly by hand as we humans would do it, then you know how to use VLOOKUP. So let's check this out. Equals VL tab. The first thing VLOOKUP wants is the lookup value. You got to look at the lap time. That's our lookup value. Comma. Just as we humans would look at a table, VLOOKUP needs to know where the table is. Now, this table, first column sorted. Any subsequent columns have the things you want to go and retrieve and bring back to the cell. So we highlight the whole table. You don't need your field names at the top. Just first, second, or however many other columns you have. Now we need to lock this using the F4 key. There's our table, comma, column index. All that means is over in the table, column 1 or column 2. Which one has the thing you want to go and get and bring back to the cell? Well, it's 1, 2. So you simply have to instruct VLOOKUP with a 2. Later, we'll have examples where the thing we want to get is in the 3 column, and so we'll put a 3, comma. Now, range lookup, approximate or exact. Exact is when you're looking up an exact phrase or something, or an exact amount. Here, we're using approximate, because remember, that 3359 fits from 0 all the way up to, but not including 35. So there's some gaps between the numbers in the first column. That's the one we want. Now, the screen tips, when they list the arguments, you see those square brackets? That means if you know the default, you don't have to enter this argument in. The default for VLOOKUP is approximate match. So we're going to acknowledge that. We know that, so we're not going to put anything in. We'll come back and look at exact match in just a second. That's it. Do you see that formula? Close parentheses. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. You got to be kidding me. And if we change something like make this 32, change this to, wow, that is amazing. Everything updates. Control Z, Z. So VLOOKUP, it's the way to go if you can have your table over here and you don't want to have a bunch of ifs. Now, this is approximate match. We're going to run into the same problem if there's no score, right? VLOOKUP, it's the same thing we saw earlier. F9, that cell reference looks at a blank or empty cell as 0. So let's go ahead and do our if, and then is blank. All we're going to do is check and see if the cell is empty. If it is, we're going to put no score, end double quotes, comma, the value if false, VLOOKUP. That formula is a lot better. In essence, when we click over here and click on that value if false in the if screen tip, that whole VLOOKUP replaced 2 ifs from our earlier formula. Control Enter, double click and send it down. Now let's look at our next example. This is a sales example. Exact same thing. We have some sales amount. Here's our sales amounts and our categories. Now the same thing applies to get below par. You could be equal to 0 all the way up to 20,000, but not including 20,000. To get par, from 20,000 all the way up to 30,000, but not including 30,000. 30,000 and above is above par. Equals VLOOKUP. We're looking up that sales amount, comma, within this table. 1, 2. The first column is sorted. The second column has the thing we want to go get. I want to hit F4 to lock that, comma. Column index, 1, 2. I'm typing in a 2. And we know that approximate matches the default, so I don't even have to put it in. Close parentheses. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. I'm going to go to the last cell and hit F2. Sure enough, that is looking good. You know what? I didn't do that up here. F2. I'm making sure that all of the cell references in the tables are working correct. All right, so that's a sales example. That's VLOOKUP with approximate match. Now we want to look up exact match. Now here in this example, we have a product. The quad boom, the Aspen, quad, sunshine, rang. These are all products we've sold. Here's the sales. We need to assign a category. Here's our lookup table. We have product names, price, And the thing we want is going to be in the third column. We have two categories of boomerangs, the freestyle and the Aussie round. So let's see if we can get this VLOOKUP to work. Equals VLOOKUP. What are we looking up? Product name, comma, the table. Wait a second. We have 3 columns, which is no problem. And I'm going to hit F4. But notice this is not sorted. This is a situation where we're going to have to use exact match. These are text items. Although VLOOKUP, we could do approximate match. And it's much faster calculating if you do. A lot of times with text data, it's not sorted. So that's where exact match comes in. All right, so it's not a problem that that first column is not sorted. Comma, column index. What you're telling VLOOKUP is which one of these columns, 1, 2, or 3, has the thing you want to go get and bring back to the cell. Well, of course, it's 3, so I'm simply typing in a 3. Comma. Now, approximate, no, that's not what we have. We have exact match. Now, you can simply double-click this and accept the false or type false out. But I got in the habit many years ago. 0 is false and 1 is true. Now, there's other lookup functions in Excel that have the same approximate and exact, which use 1 and 0. So I got in the habit of just using 0 for false. That way, it's universal with the other lookup functions. No problem. Use false. Just click from the dropdown or use a 0. Control-Enter. Double-click and send it down. That is awesome. Click in the last cell, F2. We're looking up a particular product, finding it. We know that that means it's the first row because we found it with exact match. It goes to the third column, brings back freestyle. Now, let's look at our 6th example. We're going to do the same exact example, but what if we didn't want this table? Now, there's a couple ways we could do it. We could use define names and save it in memory. But we're just going to hard code this table right in the formula and learn a totally awesome trick. Now, remember, the downside of hard coding is that they're locked into the formula, and they're not as easy to change as if they were in the cells. Let's do our regular formula. I'm looking up this product, comma, within this table. F4, comma, 3 because it's the third column, comma, 0 because it's exact match. Close parentheses, Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. Now, if I were to clear this, right, we get all these errors. But watch this. Here's a great trick. If you want to hard code the table into the formula, simply click on the table array argument or highlight it however you want. And watch this. We saw this earlier. If you hit the F9 key, it evaluates it. Now, we saw it how we can evaluate a cell to 0. But look at this. It does array syntax. Those curly brackets house the array. The comma means go over a column. Comma means go over a column. Semicolon means go down a row. So escape a second. Notice first item, comma, second item, comma, third item, semicolon, next row. So that is what we've done. F9, look at that. We've hard coded in. And we didn't have to know that curly brackets house the array, commas mean columns, and semicolon means row. It just did it for us. Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. I have perfectly assigned all those categories. Again, the caveat is that stuff is hard-coded in. If I come over here and Alt-EAA to clear, no problem, it works. I do not need to use that spreadsheet real estate. I've hard-coded it into the formula. Now, we have 2 last examples. We'll see a larger data set. Let's go over to large table. Now, what we want to do here for our finale is we want to do a product lookup and assign from a completely different sheet the actual category, recreation, freestyle, fast catch. These are the categories based on our products. That will be our first VLOOKUP. And that will be exact match. Then we want to do an approximate match lookup. We want to look up the units from the table on this sheet and assign our sales type, single, small, medium, large, extra large, and exceptional. So let's do this. The only difference is we'll see exact match, approximate match, where the table's on a different sheet. So you ready? Equals VLOOKUP. I'm looking up the product name, comma, and now we need the table. Well, in our last example, we just highlighted the cells in the sheet, but the cells aren't on this sheet. So we simply click on the sheet that has the table. Notice up in the formula bar, there's our sheet name. Now, if you have spaces in your sheet name, it'll have single apostrophes. That explanation point means sheet reference. Now watch this. Simply going to highlight all the way down. Hit F4 to lock it. And now we can see if I click on table array, there's the sheet name, the explanation point, which is the syntax for sheet reference. And there's our table range. Comma, I'll finish the formula right up here. 1, 2, 3. The third column has the thing I want to go and get. Comma, exact match. I am going to do exact match even though it looks sorted here, and it probably is. Again, if you are assured that it's sorted, the VLOOKUP will calculate much faster if you can do approximate match than exact match. In essence, exact match does a linear search one at a time. Approximate match does a binary search, which we're not going to get into here, but it's much faster. So you ready? Close parentheses. I see the formula here. Do not click back on the sheet when you're doing sheet references. Simply hit Enter, or I'm going to hit Control Enter. Not available. Double click and send it down. Let's go take a look. What is going on there? Yanaki. I see the Yanaki. So it's the Yanaki that's giving me the trouble. Watch this. I'm going to hit this cell and hit F2, A2 to C19. I'm going to come back over here, A2 to C20. It looks like I failed to get the full table. No problem. I'm going to come back over to large table, F2, and change this to 20. The table, but let's see, Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Now, just out of curiosity, Control down arrow, that's a lot of records. That's 533. Now I'm going to Control Z. If I wasn't sure, forget that. I'm just going to redo the whole thing. See, I clicked on there, delete, and now I'm going to redo that sheet reference. And maybe since I did it manually, that wasn't so good. I'm going to click in the top cell and use keyboards, Control Shift right arrow, Control Shift down arrow. That way I'm assured of going all the way down to the bottom. I can see up here it's not locked. I hit F4, Control Enter, double click and send it down. All right, so it looks like Control down arrow, F2. Wow, that's looking good. Escape, Control up arrow. And now I'm going to do the second VLOOKUP. This will be approximate. We're going to assign a sales type, so equals VL tab. We're going to look up units, comma. Within the table, it's on the other sheet, so I click on the sheet name, highlight the table. F4, I can see my sheet name, sheet explanation point, locked cell references. Here's my screen tip down here, but I'm going to type a comma. Actually, I'm going to move this up here. Comma, column index is 2, because the second column has the thing I want to go and get. And this is approximate match. This first column is sorted, so I'm leaving that out. That is the default. Close parentheses, Control Enter, and double click and send it down. Ooh, looks like we have a problem here too. So if I click in the cell with the NA and F2, oh, there's a 2. Now let's go over and look at this table. Notice in that last example, the razors, I put a 0 here. That's why I tend to put zeros. Yes, I thought that the smallest sales we'd ever have were 5, but it turns out that's not true. When I change this to a 0, now this category becomes 0 all the way up to 25, but not including 25. If we come back over here, sure enough, we see it. Now, depending on the data in this column, maybe we're never going to get zeros. Maybe we are. Maybe we'd want to change this to a 1. But there you go. That is a lot about assigning categories with VLOOKUP, approximate match, VLOOKUP exact match. And we saw back on this sheet 1134 some if with hard-coded values. We saw an if with some cell references, and then a bunch of VLOOKUPs, including the if is blank, all to assign categories. All right, we'll see you next trick.